Hello there, Friendsicles. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and I am sitting in this nursing chair recuperating, because that's what these chairs are for. They're for nursing people back to health, and that is because my kid's daycare is like the lower levels of Taurus right now. You know, biohazard, rat ghoul plagues left and right. No, but seriously, thank God for childcare workers. I mean, those guys are the unspoken heroes of our modern society. They need raises. They should be making six figures easily. Anyway, let's go to the topic of today's video. What makes the Star Wars galaxy so appealing to fans? It's something I've asked myself quite some time now as someone who, creates all this content. And I've come to the conclusion that it's not a specific thing necessarily, like the Force, Leia in the metal bikini, domestic violence, and giant Star Destroyers. Instead, it's really about the sheer amount of experiences you can have in this galaxy, which is basically one giant cheesecake factory. I mean, there are certain things on the menu that will kill you, but there's also something there for everyone, which is why we keep going back. This is why I've always said nothing beats a good old-fashioned adventure in the Star Wars galaxy. Forget about galactic politics, the struggle between the Jedi and their dark side compatriots, and just explore. Just take your finger, place it randomly on the holomap projection of the flat galaxy, and go there. Why not? And to have a proper adventure in the Star Wars galaxy, you really need a ship to take you where you want to go. And the ships I'm talking about here are more than just, vehicles for transportation. They're more like a home. They have studies inside of them, meditation chambers, sparring rooms, war rooms, a place for consensual Twilight hentai fantasy encounters, which of course just came up in the research. I know nothing about this. Now, the ship that fits the description I just gave the best is obviously the Millennium Falcon, the Corellian clunker that really started it all. But there is another ship that I believe exemplifies this idea that a ship is far more than just transportation. I'm talking about the Ebon Hawk, which a lot of fans got to use in the KOTOR games. In this adventure, we weren't just watching other heroes travel through the stars on screen, we were now the hero. And we were the ones doing the traveling and deciding where to go, and it was very exciting. Apart from excellent writing, terrific character development, and overall very solid game mechanics, KOTOR also represented Star Wars' first foray into world building during the Old Republic period. It was really cool to visit a lot of worlds that you knew about from the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy, and then seeing them like thousands of years earlier. And even back then, when Star Wars creators didn't know where to go, they would just send you to Tatooine. So not much has changed in that way. And I think the creators of the Old Republic series really try to make this part of history look aesthetically very similar to the Galactic Empire period and the Clone Wars period, for better or worse. I feel like in an effort to connect the Old Republic to the wider Star Wars timeline, they also did some things that don't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, technological stagnation is a thing we've discussed in other videos. Maybe we'll revisit it one day. Now, if you take a look at the Ebon Hawk, for instance, it's quite reminiscent of the Millennium Falcon. And actually the names are really similar as well. The Ebon Hawk also served as a hub of sorts for your entire party. You play the amnesiac fallen Jedi Revan, and through your travels you gather all sorts of companions that join you on the trip and help you. It's more of like a BioWare mechanic than just a Star Wars thing. If you played Jade Empire or the first Mass Effect or even Baldur's Gate, you know what I'm talking about. And one of the cool things about these companions is they had their own side quests and motivations and struggles, and you could choose to help them or not. There are also opportunities to romance said companions if you got close enough. Although there were some boundaries, of course. For instance, you couldn't romance Zalabar the Wookiee. You guys have no idea how nice it feels to be cradled like a child in the arms of a Wookiee. I'm sure these kind of character interactions were always a thing on like tabletop games, which obviously inspired the creators of games like KOTOR. But when BioWare came out with like these kind of mechanics in Baldur's Gate, KOTOR, it was pretty cool. It was very fresh. And here's the thing, after you complete the mission on each world you visit, you progress everyone's story slightly. And so one of my favorite parts of the game was returning back to the ship after each mission and just walking around the Ebon Hawk, talking to everyone and trying to see what's up with them. In a lot of ways, I enjoyed these relationship and side quests with your companions more than I did the full game. And I think it's because I feel like in general, like I'm playing Kingdom Deliverance 2 right now, and like I feel like side quests are more self-contained, and so you have more control over where the story goes, right? You don't have to thread it throughout like a 60-hour narrative, which is what a lot of AAA games are like that. Why am I going on this tangent? Let's get back to what we have to talk about. So every character has their own favorite spot in the ship. Karth and Bastilla, the two more important companions, are in the cockpit. HK-47 and Canderous, on the other hand, are in the garage, where their crazy asses can go buck wild, and hopefully they won't hurt anyone. And if they get a little too out of control, you can always vent them into space. They're both sealed against vacuum. And so this became my way to relax in these games, just strolling through the ship, checking all the rooms, seeing how old friends are. It was almost like a well-deserved reward for completing the main story missions on each world. And so I got to know the Ebon Hawk a lot. I knew it as well as my tiny box of an apartment. Well, actually, the Ebon Hawk is like 25 meters by 27 meters, so it is significantly bigger than my apartment. At first glance of the Ebon Hawk silhouette, it seems like its design is copying that of the Millennium Falcon, with the offset cockpit asymmetric design. The Millennium Falcon was originally a towboat for moving freight in the orbital shipyards. That offset cockpit was designed to allow pilots to see where they were navigating large containers. But that's just the exterior shape of the vessel. The cockpit itself is centered in the front of the ship. It's actually pretty boxy if you take a look at it from the outside. The minimum crew for the ship was just one, a pilot, but you also had a seat for a co-pilot navigator along with 2 additional seats for other crew members in that cockpit. Overall, this is a pretty large cockpit for a ship of this size. This is also where the navigation map is located. Players can choose their next destination from here. Now, if you continue down the corridor, there's a small room where all of the comms are located along with the ship's security cameras. Basically, the cockpit and this room are the last bastion on the ship for the crew in case they get boarded. Continue a little further and you get to the central hold, which is where the crew generally hangs out and interacts and gets their briefings. There's enough seating for everyone. Other ships from Ahsoka Tano's T6 to the Millennium Falcon also have a very similar setup. The main hold also held the ship's navigation computer. There's also a holo projector there for more public communications that involve the entire crew. It can also be used for leisure or for briefing the crew before a mission. Now, on the starboard and port side of the ship where the Millennium Falcon cockpit normally was are the 2 crew quarters with 3 beds each. And towards the rear of the ship was the engine room where the ship's famously temperamental hyperdrive was located and always in need of repairs. Just like the Millennium Falcon, the Ebon Hawk also has a aftermarket hyperdrive that is very, very fast, but also completely unreliable. On either side of the engine room, you had the cargo hold, which of course has plenty of hidden space. Like a lot of smuggling ships, there were plenty of secret compartments built into all the walls and floors and stuff like that. On the other side, you had a hangar, which was mainly reserved for swoop bikes, and maintenance on those bikes. These were used during ground missions. Although, technically speaking, these swoop bikes are more like racing vehicles built for pure speed rather than, long-range missions and endurance. This whole garage was most likely an addition made by the previous owner of the Ebon Hawk, before Revan stole it. Like the Millennium Falcon, the Ebon Hawk starts out life as a pretty normal civilian freighter. Now, a lot of people believe because of that this is a Corellian Engineering Corporation ship, but actually this is built by Core Galaxy Systems, another one of the founding shipwrights of the Old Republic. The company doesn't really exist in the modern era because around 500 BBY they were purchased by Quat-Drive Yards. There are a slew of mergers and acquisitions, loosening of regulations during this period of great peace and economic expansion. So it made it easier for Quat to acquire such a important company. But also because there were almost 500 years of peace prior to this time, if you're a shipbuilding company that depends heavily on military platforms, you're going to be screwed. And that's probably where Core Galaxy Systems, along with a lot of old legacy shipbuilders, started struggling during this period of unprecedented peace. But yeah, the Ebon Hawk started out life as a dynamic class light freighter from Core Galaxy Systems. It was built by one of the corporation's subsidiaries that specialize in this class of ships. If you guys have watched any of my Corellian Engineering Corporation videos, you know that freighters are always built to be highly modular. They are very much the sprinter or transit van of the Star Wars galaxy. Families, small businesses, influencers who want to make homelessness cool again, typically drifted towards these types of vessels. It was all about having a rugged base that was affordable. The dynamic cost only 80,000 credits new, and also having as much maximum interior space as possible so you can customize it any way you want. And like the Millennium Falcon, the Ebon Hawk has had many owners, and it's also been stolen quite a lot. And the last few owners before Revan, well, they kept on dying, and so people believe that this very robust ship was actually cursed. But actually, I think it has a lot more to do with the fact that this ship seems to be even more famous than the Millennium Falcon during its period. Its stats and exploits were well known amongst the, civilian populace. And so when people saw this ship, I think a certain percentage of them wanted to steal it. The last owner before Revan was a part of the exchange syndicate, Davik Kang. And when he wasn't betting on swoop bike races, he was smuggling goods with the Ebon Hawk. He was actually making weekly trips from Taras to Korriban and making a killing. There's no way for authorities to actually stop this ship. The original Class 3 hyperdrive had been upgraded to a Class 1 The sublight engines were also upgraded, making the ship twice as fast at sublight speeds. This thing was ridiculously fast. Only an interdictor with a ton of tractor beams had any chance of slowing it down. As far as armament goes, the dynamic freighter originally only had 2 laser turrets on the starboard and port side of the ship. The Ebon Hawk had a lot more firepower. In addition, it had 2 dual turbo laser turrets, 1 dorsal and 1 ventral, which is kind of nuts because usually you don't see ships smaller than, 100 meters have a turbo laser. Now, obviously, these aren't the same turbo lasers you would see like, on the Death Star. Those were skyscraper emplacements, but still, it's a turbo laser. And that's a pretty nasty surprise for any capital ship that underestimates this vessel. Also, there is a small retractable personal blaster that can help the Ebon Hawk's crew while they are on a ground mission. The Hawk also had proton torpedoes on board, which generally have a much larger yield than even the most powerful nukes here on Earth. This is a small, feisty fighter, and it punches hard. It's Manny Pacquiao. Here's how he looks next to a normal-sized person. I was actually shocked by how small and puny he looked, and this is why I never judge someone by their appearance or pick fights with random people, and neither should you, because they could be Manny Pacquiao in disguise. And the same thing really happened with the Ebon Hawk. I mean, if you play games with Ebon Hawk, if you didn't treat it seriously, if you underestimated this thing, you lost. Not only was the ship incredibly well armed, it was also very robustly made. It's a freighter built to be modified and handle a lot of stress. This ain't no cheap unibody construction for a kind of ship box. This is, body on frame for a working man's mule. The previous owners of the Ebon Hawk also put military-grade shields on this thing just in case the frame can't hold up. The Ebon Hawk would ultimately be the most famous and important dynamic class freighter. It played a huge role in the Jedi Civil War. Revan used this ship to dart around the galaxy, fighting against the Sith threat his former apprentice Darth Malak posed. Although I do have to mention that my playthrough of Revan was a bit different. He was just looking for snuggles. Because, long hyperspace journeys are cold, man. You don't want to do that alone. Revan would disappear into the unknown region with the Ebon Hawk in his pursuit of the true Sith Empire after the events of the first KOTOR game. What actually happens to him is one of the more messed up stories in Star Wars, but luckily we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Ebon Hawk. And it returns to known space many years later, piloted by Revan's trusty astromech, and the ship somehow becomes caught up in the events leading to the fall and defeat of the Sith Triumvirate. And here's one last surprising piece of information that brings this whole Ebon Hawk Millennium Falcon discussion full circle. It's said that the Ebon Hawk's fame led to Corellian Engineering Corporation studying the dynamic class freighter and copying many of its design features, which they would include in their XS stock light freighter. Apparently, CEC even had promotional material comparing, the performance between the dynamic class and their new freighter. It's also said that these two designs also inspired the much later YT series product line from CEC, as in the YT 1300 light freighter, aka what the Millennium Falcon was. So there you have it, guys. Another very important ship for the lore. Had a lot of great memories on this ship, and if you ever decide you want to check out KOTOR, I typically don't like retro gaming because I am all about graphics. I know it's shallow, but I feel like KOTOR holds up pretty well, especially if you're into the lore. And you can actually play it, I believe, on an iPhone or an Android phone. So, what are you waiting for? You could play KOTOR on a bus. I mean, if I'd known this when I was a kid, it would have blown my mind. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. As usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.